The soft glow of Marina's drafting lamp cut through the darkness of her home office like a lighthouse beam, illuminating blueprints that would soon become someone else's legacy. Her calloused fingers, stained with ink from countless revisions, traced the elegant curves of a revolutionary cantilever design that would grace the cover of next month's Architectural Digest. In the living room just beyond her closed door, her husband Daniel's booming laughter echoed off the soaring ceilings she had designed 5 years ago, when the world still knew her name. If you're watching this from your own home tonight, take a moment to look around at the walls that shelter you, the windows that frame your view, the very foundation beneath your feet. Someone designed every single detail with intention and artistry. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from, because architecture connects us all, even when the real architects remain invisible. Marina adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and returned to the intricate structural calculations that would make Daniel's latest impossible promise to Harrison Reed actually feasible. The tech mogul wanted a $50 million estate that defied gravity itself, cantilevered over the Pacific cliffs with glass walls that could withstand tsunami-force winds. Daniel had confidently assured Reed it was absolutely possible, his chest puffed with borrowed expertise, never once mentioning that he wouldn't know a load-bearing calculation from a grocery list. The dining room erupted in appreciative murmurs as Daniel unveiled what he called his revolutionary sustainable design concept. Marina could hear every word through the thin office wall, each one a knife twist of recognition. Those were her innovations, her late-night breakthroughs, her solutions to problems that had stumped the industry for decades. The geothermal integration system that would reduce energy costs by 70%. The rainwater filtration design that turned every storm into drinking water. The living wall concept that would literally breathe with the ocean breeze. She had spent 3 years perfecting those systems, earning patents under her own name, winning environmental design awards that Daniel now casually claimed as team victories. Her MIT graduate degree in sustainable architecture gathered dust in her locked filing cabinet, while Daniel, whose only construction experience came from watching home improvement shows, held court as the visionary genius of Reed architecture. Marina's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant, reminding her that Architectural Digest would arrive tomorrow morning for their exclusive interview with Daniel about his groundbreaking coastal design philosophy. The same interview where she would be introduced as his supportive wife, perhaps asked to bring coffee while the real creative minds discussed serious matters. She had stopped correcting journalists years ago when they assumed Daniel was the MIT graduate, when they credited him with innovations that bore her signature on every patent application. Through the wall, she could hear Daniel explaining the importance of respecting natural wind patterns in coastal construction, using terminology he had obviously memorized from her research papers. Harrison Reed's voice cut through the conversation with a technical question about lateral force distribution in high-wind scenarios. The room fell silent. Marina counted the seconds, knowing Daniel was probably doing his nervous throat-clearing routine, buying time for an answer he couldn't possibly provide. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. There it was, the gentle throat clear that meant panic. Marina rose from her drafting table and slipped out of her office, appearing in the dining room doorway like a stage assistant summoned by desperation. Daniel's relief was palpable as he gestured toward her with practiced casual elegance. He announced that his lovely wife Marina had actually done some consulting work on the technical aspects. Perhaps she could clarify the engineering details. The dismissive tone suggested she was barely qualified to discuss her own innovations, but Reed's piercing gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that suggested he saw something Daniel missed entirely. Marina offered a modest smile and launched into a 15-minute explanation of coastal wind dynamics that left the entire room speechless. She described load calculations and stress distribution patterns with the fluency of someone who had not just studied these concepts, but innovated beyond them. When she finished, Reed was staring at her with undisguised fascination, while Daniel looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on quicksand. The evening concluded with Reed shaking Marina's hand perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary, his parting words suggesting they might need additional technical consultations as the project progressed. After the guests departed, Daniel cornered Marina in the kitchen with barely controlled fury, demanding to know why she had shown off like that, why she couldn't simply support his presentation without making him look incompetent. Marina dried her hands on the dish towel she had embroidered with tiny blueprints, a wedding gift to herself that now seemed prophetic. She reminded Daniel that those were her calculations, her innovations, her 3 decades of expertise that had built everything he was taking credit for. His response was swift and brutal. He informed her that their business was registered under his name, their home was in his name, and their reputation was his reputation. If she wanted to keep any of it, she would remember who the real architect was in this relationship. As Marina climbed the stairs to their bedroom, designed with her signature flowing curves and natural light optimization, she passed the wall of framed magazine covers featuring Daniel's borrowed genius. Tomorrow, Architectural Digest would add another trophy to his collection, another victory stolen from her life's work. But tonight, for the first time in years, she had seen something different in a client's eyes. Recognition. Respect. The dawning awareness that the real architect had been hiding in plain sight all along. In her jewelry box, beneath pearls Daniel had given her to wear while serving coffee to journalists, lay her original MIT diploma and her registered architect's license. Marina traced her finger over the embossed seal that proved her credentials that predated Daniel by 5 years and outranked him by every measure that mattered. Tomorrow's interview would be another performance of his borrowed expertise, but tonight she allowed herself to imagine a different script entirely. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows Marina had designed to capture the Pacific sunrise felt like a spotlight illuminating her husband's performance. Daniel stood in their living room wearing his lucky navy blazer, the one he claimed brought out his creative vision, practicing sound bites for the Architectural Digest interview with the confidence of a man who had never doubted his right to steal another person's life's work. The journalists arrived precisely at 9, their equipment transforming Marina's carefully designed space into a magazine shoot. Lead writer Catherine Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had profiled every architectural legend from Frank Gehry to Zaha Hadid, positioned herself across from Daniel, while photographer James Chun began capturing what would become the cover story that launched Daniel's career into the stratosphere. Marina moved through her own home like a ghost, invisible to everyone except when Daniel needed fresh coffee or when someone required the optimal lighting adjustment that only the original designer would understand. She watched from the kitchen doorway as Daniel gestured expansively at the living room's signature feature, a suspended staircase that appeared to float without support, explaining his revolutionary approach to defying structural limitations. Catherine leaned forward with professional interest, asking Daniel to elaborate on his educational background and early influences. Marina's hands tightened around the coffee pot handle as Daniel launched into his well-rehearsed mythology. He spoke of discovering his passion for sustainable design during his business degree at Stanford, how he had always possessed an intuitive understanding of space and flow that formal training could never teach. Every word was carefully crafted to obscure the truth that his only construction experience involved assembling IKEA furniture. The photographer captured Daniel's confident profile against the backdrop of Marina's innovative living wall, a vertical garden system that purified air while creating a stunning natural focal point. Daniel described his inspiration for integrating nature into modern living spaces, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never spent sleepless nights calculating irrigation systems and root barrier specifications. Marina served the coffee on her grandmother's china, the delicate cups clinking against saucers like tiny bells tolling for her buried identity. Catherine accepted her cup with distracted politeness, already mentally composing paragraphs that would cement Daniel's reputation as the visionary behind sustainable luxury design. When James requested additional lighting for his shots, Marina quietly adjusted the custom smart lighting system she had programmed to follow the natural rhythm of coastal sunlight. As the interview progressed, Marina found herself transported back 15 years to the cramped apartment in Cambridge where everything had begun so differently. She had been Marina Chun then, a brilliant MIT graduate student whose thesis on biomimetic architecture had earned her recognition from the American Institute of Architects before she turned 25. Daniel was the charming MBA student she met at a coffee shop near campus, drawn to her passionate descriptions of buildings that could breathe like living organisms. Their first collaboration had been her design for a sustainable housing complex that would revolutionize affordable green living. Daniel had offered his business expertise to help her navigate the commercial development process, his MBA knowledge complementing her architectural genius. The project succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, earning international acclaim and launching what they both assumed would be an equal partnership. Somewhere in the transition from academic collaboration to commercial success, the pronouns had shifted from we to I in Daniel's presentations. Marina's contributions became consulting work, then supportive input, then invisible background labor that enabled his increasingly confident appropriation of her innovations. By the time they married 3 years later, the architectural world knew only one name associated with their groundbreaking designs. The turning point had been so gradual that Marina barely noticed until it was complete. Daniel possessed the natural charisma and networking skills that opened doors in the Old Boys architecture establishment, while Marina's quiet brilliance was easily overshadowed by his confident presentations. Clients remembered Daniel's firm handshakes and persuasive speeches about vision and leadership, while Marina became the technical specialist who made his promises actually work. Catherine's next question snapped Marina back to the present with devastating clarity. The journalist wanted to understand Daniel's creative process, particularly his approach to the revolutionary cantilevered designs that had become his signature style. Marina watched her husband's face as he described the meditative inspiration that struck him during solitary walks along the coast, how the sight of waves carving cliffsides had sparked his understanding of how buildings could work with natural forces rather than against them. Those walks had been Marina's ritual during her most challenging design phases, her method for processing complex engineering problems by observing how nature solved similar challenges. She had shared those insights with Daniel during their early years together, never imagining he would package her personal creative process as his own mystical connection to architectural inspiration. The photographer positioned Daniel at the window overlooking their infinity pool, another Marina innovation that created the illusion of water flowing directly into the Pacific horizon. Daniel discussed his philosophy of erasing boundaries between interior and exterior spaces, explaining how true visionary design required seeing beyond conventional limitations. Behind the camera, Marina stood holding a fresh pot of coffee, her MIT diploma gathering dust in the filing cabinet upstairs, while her husband claimed credit for insights that had emerged from her doctoral research. Catherine's final questions focused on future projects, particularly the highly anticipated Reed estate that would showcase Daniel's most ambitious sustainable design concepts. Marina listened as her husband promised revolutionary innovations in coastal construction, energy independence systems that would set new environmental standards, and structural solutions that would influence architectural practice for generations. Each promise represented months of Marina's upcoming late-night work, complex calculations, and innovative engineering that would transform Daniel's confident assertions into buildable reality. She knew that within hours of this interview's conclusion, she would be back at her drafting table, turning his impossible commitments into the detailed blueprints that would once again prove his genius to the world. The interview concluded with handshakes and business cards, Catherine promising that the feature would run in next month's issue with Daniel positioned as the leading voice in sustainable luxury architecture. As the team packed their equipment, James mentioned that the photographs would emphasize Daniel's connection to the natural environment that inspired his work, perhaps including shots of him on the cliffside where his creative visions originated. After the journalists departed, Daniel poured himself a celebratory scotch from the wet bar Marina had designed to disappear seamlessly into their living room wall. He toasted his own brilliance while Marina cleared away the coffee cups, already calculating the sleepless nights ahead as she worked to make his latest promises to Harrison Reed actually feasible. In 3 weeks, Daniel would present preliminary designs for the $50 million estate, designs that existed nowhere except in Marina's imagination and expertise. As evening approached and Daniel retreated to his office to return calls from potential clients inspired by word of the upcoming magazine feature, Marina climbed the stairs to their bedroom. In her jewelry box, Beneath the pearls and diamonds that symbolized her role as the successful architect's wife, lay documents that told a different story entirely. Her original business registration papers from 15 years ago, establishing Chun's Sustainable Architecture as her sole proprietorship 6 months before she ever met Daniel. Patents bearing her name as primary inventor. Awards and recognition that predated their relationship by years. Tonight, as Daniel celebrated another successful performance of Borrowed Genius, Marina made a decision that would change everything. She unlocked her filing cabinet and removed a manila folder labeled Professional Documentation, placing it on her nightstand where morning light would illuminate the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. 3 weeks later, Harrison Reed's sleek Tesla pulled into the circular driveway that Marina had designed to showcase approaching vehicles like sculptural elements against the ocean backdrop. Daniel straightened his tie and checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, radiating the confidence of a man whose recent Architectural Digest feature had already generated 12 new project inquiries from celebrity clients seeking sustainable luxury designs. Marina arranged the presentation materials in their conference room, her fingers trembling slightly as she positioned the preliminary blueprints she had spent 70 sleepless hours perfecting. The Reed Estate design pushed every boundary of coastal engineering, featuring a revolutionary cantilever system that would suspend the main living spaces 40 feet above the cliff face, while maintaining complete structural integrity during seismic events. Reed entered their home office with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to cutting through presentations to reach essential truths. His gray eyes swept across the architectural models Marina had painstakingly crafted, each one demonstrating a different aspect of the complex structural solutions required for his impossible dream home. Daniel welcomed their most important client with expansive gestures and practiced charm, immediately launching into his vision for redefining luxury coastal living. The first 15 minutes proceeded smoothly as Daniel described the estate's overall concept and aesthetic philosophy. He spoke eloquently about harmony between human habitation and natural forces, his confidence building as Reed nodded approvingly at the soaring glass facades and infinity pool that seemed to merge with the Pacific horizon. Marina stood quietly behind Daniel's chair, her role clearly defined as technical support for the creative genius. Reed's first technical question arrived like a precision missile targeting Daniel's weakest point. The tech mogul leaned forward and asked for specific details about the foundation engineering required to support the cantilever loads, particularly the soil composition analysis and seismic retrofitting calculations that would ensure stability during major earthquakes. Daniel's confident smile flickered as he glanced toward the detailed engineering reports Marina had prepared. He began explaining the importance of thorough geological surveys, while subtly seeking Marina's intervention through practiced eye contact. She stepped forward and provided a comprehensive analysis of soil bearing capacity and seismic design factors, her explanation so detailed and technically sophisticated that Reed's attention shifted entirely to her competent delivery. Sensing opportunity in Reed's obvious respect for Marina's expertise, Daniel made the fatal decision to exceed his own understanding. He interrupted Marina's technical explanation to announce his revolutionary structural innovation that would eliminate traditional foundation requirements entirely. According to Daniel, his new cantilevered support system would anchor directly into the cliff face using a proprietary tension cable network that could flex with seismic movement while maintaining absolute stability. Reed's eyebrows rose with professional interest as he requested detailed specifications for this groundbreaking engineering solution. How exactly would the tension cables distribute load forces across irregular rock formations? What redundancy systems would prevent catastrophic failure if individual cables experienced fatigue stress? Which materials would provide the necessary tensile strength while resisting coastal corrosion over decades of exposure? The conference room fell into uncomfortable silence as Daniel realized he had promised something completely beyond his comprehension. Marina watched her husband's face cycle through confusion, panic, and desperate calculation as he attempted to formulate answers to questions that required years of structural engineering expertise. His throat-clearing routine began in earnest while sweat beaded along his hairline despite the room's perfect climate control. Reed's patient waiting stretched into awkward territory as Daniel stammered about consulting with specialized engineering firms and conducting additional analysis to refine the specific details. The tech mobile's expression shifted from anticipation to polite skepticism as he observed Daniel's obvious discomfort with his own supposed innovation. Marina found herself facing a moment of critical decision. She could rescue Daniel as she had countless times before, stepping forward to explain the complex engineering principles that would make his impossible promise actually feasible. Or she could remain silent and let him experience the consequences of claiming expertise he had never possessed. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, Marina said nothing. She watched Daniel flounder through increasingly desperate explanations about revolutionary concepts that existed only in his imagination. Reed's sharp intelligence quickly recognized the gap between confident promises and actual understanding, his questions becoming more pointed as he probed for substance behind Daniel's architectural theater. Finally, professional obligation overcame personal satisfaction, and Marina stepped forward to explain the modified cable-stayed suspension system that could indeed anchor a cantilevered structure directly to cliff faces. Her detailed knowledge of tensile engineering and load distribution principles rescued Daniel's reputation while simultaneously demonstrating the vast gap between his claimed expertise and her actual competence. Reed listened to Marina's explanation with undisguised fascination, asking follow-up questions that revealed his own sophisticated understanding of engineering principles. Their technical discussion continued for 20 minutes while Daniel sat excluded from a conversation about his own supposed innovation, reduced to nodding along with concepts he couldn't comprehend. As the meeting concluded, Reed shook Marina's hand first, commenting that her engineering insights would be crucial for the project's success. His suggestion that future technical discussions might benefit from her direct involvement sent warning signals through Daniel's nervous system. When Reed requested copies of Marina's calculations for his own engineering team's review, Daniel quickly volunteered to have his office prepare comprehensive documentation. After Reed departed, Daniel cornered Marina in their kitchen with barely controlled fury. He accused her of deliberately undermining his presentation by showing off technical knowledge that made him look incompetent. His voice rose as he demanded to know why she couldn't simply support his leadership without making herself the center of attention. Marina calmly reminded Daniel that she had saved his reputation by explaining concepts he obviously didn't understand. Without her intervention, Reed would have discovered that Daniel's revolutionary innovation was nothing more than confident nonsense backed by zero technical knowledge. Her willingness to rescue him again had preserved his credibility, but it had also revealed the true source of their firm's architectural expertise. Daniel's response revealed the desperation beneath his confident facade. He informed Marina that he was considering bringing in a licensed structural engineer to handle the technical aspects of the Reed project, someone whose credentials could match the complexity of their most ambitious design. The implication was clear. Marina's expertise was becoming too visible, too essential, too threatening to his carefully constructed identity as the creative visionary. That evening, as Marina worked late into the night preparing the detailed engineering documentation Reed had requested, she realized that Daniel's latest crisis had created an unexpected opportunity. For the first time in years, a client had recognized her technical expertise as essential to project success. Reed's interest in her calculations and engineering insights suggested he understood exactly who possessed the real architectural competence in their supposed partnership. Marina's fingers moved across her computer keyboard, preparing reports that bore her professional calculations and engineering signatures. Each page of technical documentation represented years of specialized training that Daniel could never replicate or claim as his own. Tomorrow, when Reed's engineering team reviewed her work, they would see the same professional credentials and innovative solutions that had been hiding behind Daniel's borrowed reputation for far too long. As midnight approached and Daniel slept peacefully upstairs, confident that his wife would once again transform his impossible promises into buildable reality, Marina made copies of every document. Her engineering reports, her structural calculations, her professional credentials, and most importantly, her licensing information that proved beyond any doubt who possessed the legal authority to sign off on complex architectural projects in California. For 15 years, she had enabled Daniel's theft of her professional identity. Tonight, she began building the foundation for reclaiming everything he had stolen. Harrison Reed's corner office in downtown San Francisco commanded a panoramic view of the Bay, but his attention focused entirely on the confidential investigation report spread across his mahogany desk. As someone who had built a tech empire by recognizing talent and exposing fraud, Reed possessed finely tuned instincts for detecting discrepancies between perception and reality. The preliminary findings about Reed architecture confirmed suspicions that had been growing since his first meeting with Daniel and Marina. Private investigator Sarah Martinez had compiled a comprehensive analysis of every project attributed to Daniel over the past 15 years. Her methodology was elegant in its simplicity. She tracked the timeline of innovative breakthroughs against personnel records, patent filings, and professional licensing documentation. The pattern that emerged painted a devastating picture of systematic intellectual theft that had fooled an entire industry. Every revolutionary sustainable design feature that had made Daniel famous coincided precisely with Marina's involvement in the firm. The biomimetic ventilation systems that had earned international acclaim. The energy-neutral building envelopes that had redefined luxury construction standards. The structural innovations that allowed impossible architectural geometries. Without exception, these breakthroughs appeared only when Marina's name appeared somewhere in the project documentation. Conversely, projects attempted during Marina's brief absences for family emergencies or professional conferences showed a marked decline in innovation and technical sophistication. During a 6-month period when Marina had traveled to MIT as a visiting lecturer, Daniel's firm had produced only conventional designs that borrowed heavily from existing architectural trends. The contrast was so stark that industry observers had speculated about Daniel's temporary creative block during that period. Reed's investigation revealed even more damning evidence in the form of professional licensing records. Daniel possessed only a business administration degree and had never completed the architectural training or examination requirements necessary for professional certification in California. Every project bearing his name required the legal oversight of a licensed architect, a requirement consistently fulfilled by Marina's credentials and professional signatures. Martinez had also uncovered Marina's original business registration documents, filed 6 months before she met Daniel, establishing Chun's sustainable architecture as her independent practice. The early project portfolio showed the same innovative design philosophy that would later be attributed to Daniel, suggesting that his reputation was built entirely on appropriating her pre-existing expertise and vision. Meanwhile, Daniel paced frantically through his home office, his confident facade crumbling as he recognized the dangerous territory Reed's technical questions had revealed. The tech mobile's follow-up emails requesting detailed engineering specifications and professional certifications had triggered alarm bells that kept Daniel awake through increasingly desperate nights. His usual strategy of delegating technical challenges to Marina was becoming untenable as Reed's inquiries grew more specific and demanding. Daniel's solution was characteristically self-serving and ultimately self-destructive. He informed Marina that future client communications regarding the Reed project would flow exclusively through his office, ostensibly to maintain consistent messaging and professional presentation standards. Marina was to continue her technical work behind the scenes while Daniel handled all direct client contact, ensuring that Reed received information from the project's creative leader rather than technical support staff. Marina recognized this strategy as desperation disguised as business protocol, but she agreed to Daniel's restrictions while quietly maintaining copies of all technical documentation for her personal records. She continued her engineering work on the cantilever systems and seismic retrofitting, while Daniel crafted carefully worded responses to Reed's increasingly sophisticated technical questions. Reed's direct phone call to Marina changed everything. His assistant had contacted her personal cell phone number, obtained from professional licensing databases, requesting a brief technical consultation about foundation specifications that Daniel's latest email had failed to address adequately. The conversation was scheduled as a simple clarification call, but it became Marina's first opportunity in 15 years to discuss her work directly with a client who valued her expertise. Speaking with Reed without Daniel's presence felt like emerging from underwater after holding her breath for decades. The Tech Mogul's questions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of engineering principles and genuine appreciation for innovative problem-solving approaches. When Marina explained her tension cable suspension concept in detail, Reed listened with the focused attention of someone who recognized breakthrough thinking when he encountered it. Their 30-minute conversation covered more technical ground than Marina had been allowed to discuss with clients in years. Reed's follow-up questions revealed that he had been researching sustainable architecture extensively, preparing himself to engage intelligently with design concepts that would define his legacy project. His obvious respect for Marina's expertise and his subtle probing about her educational background suggested he was beginning to understand the real source of the firm's innovative capabilities. When Reed casually mentioned that his engineering team was particularly impressed with the professional documentation Marina had prepared, she realized that her technical reports had been circulating among some of the industry's most sophisticated practitioners. The validation felt intoxicating after years of having her work filtered through Daniel's presentations and stripped of her professional identity. Daniel's reaction to learning about Reed's direct contact with Marina was explosive and revealing. He accused her of deliberately undermining his client relationship by discussing technical details without proper supervision. His anger escalated as he realized that Marina's conversation with Reed had exposed gaps in his own understanding that could no longer be concealed through confident misdirection. That evening, Daniel presented Marina with an ultimatum that revealed the true nature of their 15-year partnership. He informed her that Reed Architecture was his company, their home was his investment, and their professional reputation belonged to him. If Marina wanted to preserve any of the life they had built together, she needed to remember her role as technical support staff rather than attempting to establish independent relationships with their clients. Daniel's threats extended beyond professional consequences to personal destruction. He reminded Marina that their shared assets were structured legally to benefit him exclusively, that their social connections in the architectural community viewed her as his assistant rather than his equal, and that any attempt to challenge his authority would result in her complete professional and personal isolation. For the first time in their relationship, Marina responded to Daniel's threats with calm defiance rather than submissive compliance. She pointed out that her conversation with Reed had focused entirely on technical aspects of the project, exactly the kind of specialized support that Daniel's presentations had promised to provide. If Daniel felt threatened by her professional competence, perhaps he should consider developing his own expertise rather than relying exclusively on her uncredited contributions. Daniel's final warning was delivered with chilling precision. He informed Marina that he was already exploring options for bringing in licensed engineers who could handle the technical aspects of major projects without requiring the level of oversight that her involvement demanded. Her usefulness to the firm was becoming a liability that threatened the smooth operation of their client relationships. As Daniel stormed out to meet potential business partners who might provide alternative technical expertise, Marina sat alone in the conference room, where her innovative designs had been presented as Daniel's creative vision for 15 years. The manila folder containing her professional documentation lay open on the table, revealing credentials and achievements that predated their relationship and established her legal authority over every aspect of their architectural practice. Marina's phone buzzed with a text message from Reed's assistant, thanking her for the excellent technical consultation and requesting her availability for additional engineering discussions as the project progressed. The message included a subtle but unmistakable indication that Reed's team viewed her as the primary technical authority for the project, regardless of Daniel's official role as creative director. Tonight, Marina faced a choice that would determine the trajectory of her remaining professional years. She could continue enabling Daniel's theft of her identity, preserving their comfortable life built on systematic fraud, or she could begin asserting the professional authority that had always belonged to her alone. Reed's respect for her expertise had shown her a glimpse of the recognition she had sacrificed for Daniel's success, recognition that could be reclaimed if she possessed the courage to demand what was rightfully hers. The blueprints for the Reed estate lay spread across her drafting table, every line and calculation representing her innovative vision made manifest through technical expertise that Daniel could never replicate. Tomorrow, she would make the decision that would either restore her professional identity or destroy everything she had spent 15 years building behind Daniel's stolen reputation. Reed's email arrived on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide Marina's life into before and after. His message was professionally cordial, but carried undertones that made Daniel's hands shake as he read the seemingly routine request. Reed's engineering team required original blueprints and certification documents for all previous projects to verify design consistency and professional standards before proceeding with the $50 million estate commission. The request was standard practice for projects of this magnitude, but Daniel understood immediately that compliance would expose the foundation of lies supporting his entire career. Every blueprint filed with the city bore Marina's official architect stamp and license number, legal requirements that Daniel had never questioned because he assumed they were meaningless technicalities handled by his competent wife. Marina watched Daniel's face drain of color as the implications crystallized in his mind. 15 years of borrowed genius were about to be exposed through the simple act of producing legally mandated documentation that bore her professional credentials on every page. The official architect stamps that transformed her innovative designs into legally buildable structures carried her name, her license number, and her professional liability for every structural decision Daniel had claimed as his creative vision. In the filing cabinets that Daniel had never bothered to examine, Marina maintained meticulous records that told the true story of their firm's success. Original blueprints bearing her MI-trained hand and professional seal. Patent applications listing her as primary inventor for every sustainable innovation Daniel claimed to have created. Award certificates from the American Institute of Architects recognizing her pioneering work in biomimetic design, achievements that predated their relationship by years. Daniel's desperate scramble to delay the inevitable began immediately. He contacted Reed's office with explanations about organizing comprehensive documentation packages that would showcase their firm's evolution and design philosophy. His stalling tactics bought 48 hours while Marina quietly assembled the historical record that would destroy his reputation forever. The moment of truth arrived when Reed appeared at their office personally, accompanied by his senior engineer and project manager, to collect the requested documentation. Daniel's nervous energy filled the conference room as Marina calmly presented 15 years of architectural history that bore her professional signature on every innovation Daniel had ever claimed. Reed's engineering consultant, a respected professional named Dr. Patricia Williams who held advanced degrees from both MIT and Stanford, examined the first blueprint with the trained eye of someone who understood the significance of professional certifications. Her immediate recognition of Marina's credentials created an electric tension that made Daniel's confident facade crumble in real time. Dr. Williams looked up from the blueprints with obvious surprise, asking Marina directly about her educational background and professional training. The conversation that followed was Marina's liberation from 15 years of enforced invisibility. She described her MIT graduate work in sustainable architecture, her innovative thesis on biomimetic building systems, and her early recognition as one of the most promising young architects in the field of environmental design. Reed listened with growing fascination as Marina detailed her professional journey, her early patents for revolutionary building envelope systems, and her founding of Chin's sustainable architecture 6 months before she met Daniel. The timeline she presented made Daniel's role in their supposed partnership transparently clear. He had contributed business management and client relations while she provided every aspect of actual architectural expertise. Dr. Williams requested Marina's professional licensing documentation, standard verification for any architect claiming responsibility for complex structural designs. Marina produced her current California architectural license, her professional engineering certification, and her membership credentials from the American Institute of Architects. Each document bore dates and achievements that established her independent expertise years before Daniel entered her life. When Dr. Williams asked Daniel for his corresponding professional credentials, the silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's stammered explanations about business administration degrees and management expertise revealed the shocking truth that he had been practicing architecture without any formal training, education, or legal certification. Every building bearing his name had been designed, certified, and legally approved through Marina's hidden qualifications. Reed's questions became increasingly pointed as the scope of Daniel's deception became undeniable. How had Daniel managed to present himself as a licensed architect when he possessed no relevant education or certification? Who had actually designed the revolutionary sustainable systems that had earned their firm international recognition? Why had Marina's contributions been systematically minimized in every public presentation of their work? Marina's responses were delivered with the calm authority of someone finally reclaiming her professional identity after years of forced silence. She explained that Daniel's natural charisma and business acumen had made him an effective spokesperson for her innovations, but that every technical breakthrough, every structural solution, every sustainable design element had originated from her education and expertise. She had enabled his public role while remaining invisible, believing their partnership served both their interests. The historical evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Patent applications listing Marina as primary inventor, professional awards recognizing her individual achievements, original business registration documents establishing her firm before Daniel's involvement, university transcripts documenting her advanced degrees in sustainable architecture and structural engineering. Every document bore dates and credentials that exposed Daniel's borrowed expertise as systematic intellectual theft. Dr. Williams began comparing the timelines of innovation against Marina's career milestones, revealing patterns that demolished any remaining doubt about the true source of their firm's success. The revolutionary biomimetic ventilation systems had emerged directly from Marina's MIT thesis research. The energy-neutral building envelopes represented practical applications of her published academic papers. The structural innovations that allowed impossible architectural geometries reflected her advanced engineering training that Daniel completely lacked. Reed's final questions were directed exclusively toward Marina, his recognition of her professional authority now explicit and undeniable. He wanted to understand her vision for the cantilever suspension system, her approach to integrating sustainable technologies with luxury design standards, and her confidence in the structural solutions that would make his impossible dream home actually buildable. As Marina discussed her engineering innovations with Reed and Dr. Williams, Daniel sat excluded from the conversation about projects he had claimed as his creative legacy for 15 years. The professional respect and technical engagement he had stolen from Marina was being restored to its rightful owner while he watched his constructed identity dissolve before the eyes of his most important client. Reed's departure included a private moment with Marina where he acknowledged what had become obvious to everyone in the room. He expressed his appreciation for finally meeting the real architect behind the innovative designs that had attracted his interest in their firm. His suggestion that future technical discussions would benefit from her direct involvement was delivered with the understanding that Daniel's role in the project had become essentially decorative. After Reed left, Daniel faced the complete collapse of everything he had built on Marina's stolen foundation. His threats and ultimatums carried no weight against the documented evidence of her superior qualifications and legal authority. His promised contact with alternative engineering firms seemed pathetic compared to Reed's obvious preference for working directly with the architect who actually possessed the expertise to deliver his vision. That evening, as Daniel retreated to his office to contemplate the ruins of his borrowed career, Marina stood in their conference room surrounded by the evidence of her true professional accomplishments. The blueprints bearing her architectural seal, the patents listing her as primary inventor, the awards recognizing her innovations, all combined to tell the story that had been hidden for far too long. Tomorrow, word of Reed's discovery would begin circulating through the professional architectural community that had been deceived by Daniel's confident performance for 15 years. The revelation that their most celebrated sustainable design innovator was actually Marina Chun, not Daniel Reed, would reshape understanding of every project their firm had completed and expose the systematic fraud that had stolen her rightful recognition. The California State Architecture Board's investigation began within 72 hours of Reed's engineering team filing their compliance report. Dr. Patricia Williams, as a licensed professional engineer, was legally obligated to report evidence of unlicensed architectural practice, triggering an immediate review of every project Daniel had claimed under his name over the past 15 years. The state board's findings would reshape the architectural industry's understanding of professional fraud and establish precedents for protecting legitimate practitioners from systematic credential theft. Marina received the board's official notification on a Friday morning that felt like sunrise after 15 years of artificial darkness. The investigation had confirmed what the documentary evidence made undeniable. Daniel had been practicing architecture illegally since the beginning of their partnership, signing contracts and representing himself as a licensed professional while possessing neither the education nor certification required by California state law. Every project bearing his name was legally invalid without Marina's hidden supervision and professional oversight. The board's report detailed violations that carried both professional and criminal implications. Unlicensed practice of architecture, fraudulent representation of professional credentials, and systematic appropriation of another architect's intellectual property. The financial scope of Daniel's fraud exceeded $200 million in completed projects, making this one of the largest professional credentialing scandals in the state's architectural history. Meanwhile, Harrison Reed scheduled a private meeting with Marina at his downtown office, where the conversation that should have happened 15 years ago finally took place. Reed's corner office provided a panoramic view of San Francisco Bay, while Marina presented her vision for the Cantilever estate that would become the defining project of her restored career. Without Daniel's presence to filter her expertise through borrowed authority, Marina engaged with Reed as the accomplished architect she had always been. Their discussion covered every aspect of the estate design with the depth and sophistication that Daniel's presentations had never achieved. Marina explained her biomimetic approach to coastal construction, drawing inspiration from cliff-dwelling ecosystems that had evolved structural solutions over millions of years. Her tension cable suspension system would anchor the cantilevered living spaces directly into the bedrock while maintaining flexibility during seismic events, creating architecture that worked with natural forces rather than fighting against them. Reed's questions demonstrated the technical sophistication that had made Daniel so uncomfortable during their previous meetings. How would the cable network distribute load forces across irregular rock formations? What materials would provide optimal tensile strength while resisting decades of coastal corrosion? Which monitoring systems would ensure structural integrity throughout the building's operational life? Marina answered each question with the confident precision of someone discussing her own innovations rather than explaining borrowed concepts. The contract signing ceremony felt like a coronation for Marina's restored professional identity. Reed's legal team had restructured the agreement to reflect the true architect behind their revolutionary design, with Marina's name prominently featured as primary architect and Daniel relegated to business development consultant. The $50 million commission represented the largest sustainable architecture project on the West Coast, a showcase that would cement Marina's reputation as the visionary she had always been. Daniel's attempts to salvage his reputation became increasingly desperate and ultimately self-destructive. His lawyer's threats to contest Marina's claims collapsed when presented with the overwhelming documentary evidence of her superior qualifications and legal authority. The Architectural Licensing Board's findings had made Daniel's fraud a matter of public record, destroying any remaining credibility he might have possessed in professional circles. Catherine Morrison's return visit to their home office carried entirely different implications than her original Architectural Digest interview with Daniel. The journalist had followed the Architectural Board's investigation with professional fascination, recognizing the human interest story hidden within the technical violations. Her new feature would correct the record about every innovation Daniel had claimed, restoring proper credit to the architect who had actually created the revolutionary designs that had influenced an entire generation of sustainable builders. Marina's interview with Morrison took place in the same conference room where Daniel had stolen credit for her life's work just months earlier. This time, Marina sat in the primary interview position while Morrison's questions focused on her educational background, her early innovations, and her vision for the future of sustainable architecture. The photographer captured Marina at her drafting table, surrounded by the original blueprints that bore her professional seal and architectural innovations. The conversation covered Marina's MIT graduate work, her pioneering research in biomimetic building systems, and her founding of Chun's sustainable architecture as an independent practice. Morrison's article would establish the true timeline of innovation, showing how every breakthrough attributed to Daniel had actually emerged from Marina's education and expertise. The correction would be published in the same magazine that had celebrated Daniel's borrowed genius, restoring historical accuracy to the architectural record. Legal proceedings to reclaim ownership of the firm proceeded with mathematical precision through Marina's patent attorney, who specialized in intellectual property recovery cases. The evidence was overwhelming. Marina's original business registration predating her relationship with Daniel, patents listing her as primary inventor for every sustainable innovation, and professional licensing documentation establishing her legal authority over all architectural decisions. Daniel's claims to shared ownership dissolved under examination of the historical record. The court's decision was swift and comprehensive. Marina regained sole ownership of Chun's sustainable architecture, along with all intellectual property rights, client relationships, and pending projects. Daniel's business partnership interest was ruled invalid due to his fraudulent misrepresentation of professional credentials throughout their relationship. The judgment included damages for 15 years of stolen professional credit, calculated based on the career advancement opportunities Marina had sacrificed while enabling Daniel's borrowed success. Daniel's professional exile was as complete as his former elevation had been artificial. Word of the licensing board's findings spread through the architectural community with the speed of digital communication, destroying relationships that had been built on his appropriated expertise. Clients canceled pending projects rather than risk association with the fraud scandal, while former colleagues distanced themselves from someone who had deceived the entire industry about his basic qualifications. The construction management position Daniel eventually found with a large development company represented a humbling return to his actual skill level. His MBA credentials qualified him for project administration and client relations, but his architectural pretensions had been permanently destroyed by the documentary evidence of his systematic deception. Former peers who had once celebrated his design vision now viewed him as a cautionary tale about the dangers of credential fraud in professional practice. Marina's completion of the Reed estate 18 months later showcased the full scope of her innovative vision without the filtering effects of Daniel's appropriated presentations. The cantilever suspension system performed flawlessly during its first major seismic event, demonstrating the superiority of biomimetic engineering principles over conventional coastal construction methods. Architectural publications featured the estate as a breakthrough achievement in sustainable luxury design, crediting Marina's revolutionary approach to integrating natural forces with human habitation. The American Institute of Architects Awards ceremony in Chicago provided the perfect venue for Marina's professional vindication. Her acceptance speech for the gold medal in sustainable innovation addressed an audience that included many architects who had unknowingly celebrated her work under Daniel's name for years. She spoke about the importance of accurate professional attribution and the responsibility of the architectural community to protect legitimate practitioners from systematic credential theft. Standing at the podium with her gold medal, Marina looked out at colleagues who were seeing her true professional identity for the first time despite her 15-year career in sustainable architecture. Her speech emphasized that innovation emerges from rigorous education, sustained research, and creative problem-solving rather than confident presentations of borrowed expertise. The architectural community's recognition of her achievements felt like emerging from involuntary invisibility into the professional spotlight that had always rightfully belonged to her. The epilogue of Marina's restored career unfolded with the momentum of compressed recognition finally released. Chun's sustainable architecture became the most sought-after firm for luxury environmental design, with a waiting list that extended 3 years into the future. Marina's client base included technology leaders, entertainment celebrities, and international corporations seeking buildings that would set new standards for sustainable luxury construction. Her new office in downtown San Francisco overlooked the bay where Reed's estate sat as a testament to her innovative engineering solutions. The cantilever structure had become a pilgrimage site for architecture students and professionals studying the integration of biomimetic principles with cutting-edge construction technologies. Marina's designs were being implemented in major projects across 6 continents, establishing her influence over the next generation of sustainable building practices. Daniel's final humiliation came through his own subscription to Architectural Digest, the magazine that had once celebrated his borrowed genius and now featured Marina's authentic innovations on its cover monthly. The contrast between his current reality and Marina's soaring career trajectory provided daily reminders of what he had lost when his deception finally collapsed under the weight of documented evidence. Marina's story became a landmark case in architectural education, taught in professional ethics courses as an example of how credential fraud ultimately destroys itself while genuine expertise inevitably rises to its deserved recognition. Her journey from invisible ghost architect to internationally celebrated innovator proved that talent, education, and integrity create foundations that cannot be stolen, only temporarily obscured by those who mistake borrowed presentations for actual competence. The oceanfront estate that started as Daniel's impossible promise had become Marina's crowning achievement, a cantilevered monument to what happens when architects who actually understand their craft are finally allowed to practice under their own names. Every sunset that illuminated the suspended glass pavilions served as a reminder that the most beautiful architecture emerges not from stolen credit, but from the authentic marriage of education, innovation, and the courage to claim what rightfully belongs to the creator.